Welcome, Wargamers. Doug here from 2 Plus Tough, and recently I had the extremely cool opportunity to hang out with Leo over from Parabellum Wargames. These are the guys who make Conquest, which we've covered quite a bit here on the channel and will continue to do so. But they reached out to me and were like, hey, would you want to do an interview with any of us? I was like, absolutely, I would love the opportunity because game design is something, as you may well know, I've been dipping my toe into in 2021. And so having this resource of just picking somebody's brain who's a lot further along on that journey than me was just really refreshing. And so there's a lot of great insights both to Conquest and how that game has been in development, but then also just things that apply to all miniature war games. And so I really do think that you will get a lot out of this interview. If you find my and Leo's excitement about Conquest infectious, consider using the link in the description down below. It'll save you 10% on all your purchases through Parabellum, and it goes a long way to supporting the channel. But honestly, more than that, just sit back, grab your paintbrushes, and listen to an extremely interesting conversation with a great guy. Hey everybody, Doug here, and thank you so much for listening. And I have a very special guest from Parabellum, and I do not want to butcher your name. I'm so sorry. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself and what you do?
Hey everyone, this is Leo, or Leandros, my whole name. I'm the community manager for Parabellum Wargames. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, actually, thank you so much for asking if you can come on. I didn't realize how much I wanted to chat with one of you guys until the offer was in front of me, and I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. So as you know, if you're not familiar or you're newer to the channel, Parabellum is the studio that's creating Conquest, Last Arguments of Kings, and First Blood. Two games that I cover here quite frequently, and I've been thoroughly enjoying both of them with an awesome community of people over on their Discord. And I had you on. I just threw a few questions at you, but we can definitely keep it more relaxed and just kind of talk wherever the conversation takes us. But let me ask you this: how long have you been with Parabellum? Like since the founding, or did you come on a little later?
I'm with Parabellum, I think, from the very inception of it. So maybe, okay. So yeah, if I'm not maybe the first employee, I'm definitely one of the first. Like I was working on this project before it even formed to anything that could have employees. Like that. So yeah, I'm there from the very beginning of the project.
Nice, that's awesome.
And seeing how far it has come is just incredible.
Yeah, so I mean, because it started like in the last 3 years, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. So launch was end of July 2 years ago. Incidentally, on my birthday, so that's
there you go.
Very, very added bonus, yeah. But the preparation and the design of the game and Parabellum as a whole has been going on for about 5 years now.
Okay, see, that's incredible. So, the reason at the time of recording that I point that out is because 2.5-ish years ago from the actual start of the company, like you guys have progressed at rocket speed when it comes to. There's the initial 2-player starter set, and the models in that are really cool. I mean, I prefer the Spire side of things because there's a little bit more detail in the etches on their shields. But then if you compare that, you were just talking about this Apex Predator from the Wadroon on your desk. I mean, the advancements you guys have made in sculpting and quality and plastics and that kind of stuff is astounding for 2.5 years.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you. It has definitely progressed a lot. And when we started the company, first of all, we started the company with a whole mindset of we didn't want to do a Kickstarter, but then we wanted to do everything on our own terms, right? We did not want to. We wanted to be able to release the game when we were ready to do so, and there was a huge learning curve, right?
Of course.
It's producing in plastic, doing all these things definitely is a huge ordeal, but we doubled down on working and worked hard on the project, and within the last 2.5 years, we went to being able to produce product like the Wadroon, which are just light years ahead from where we started. And personally, I love our entire range, but it's very, how fast we're progressing is very visible, and it's something that makes me very happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I wasn't trying to cast aspersions on the earlier models. It just you can just see the difference in
Yeah.
plastic and depth and that kind of stuff. So, absolutely. Well, let me ask you this. So, since you brought it up, how did Parabellum found itself? I mean, because so much online is just basically Kickstarters or GameFound or insert whatever
Mhm.
crowdfunding site you want. I mean, that's a huge decision, and I super love it. I'm curious about that. Like, just everyone pitched in money, and you guys just made it.
So, so the first of all, Conquest and the world of Ea and everything that comes, the intellectual work behind it is definitely the love child of our founder, Stavros.
Yes.
So he's the one that conceived the world. He's the one that then back then started, talking with Kostadinos, our lead writer, and started working at the very beginning, as a project, right, for him, because Stavros is he loves military history, he loves fantasy, he loves writing. So um he always had this idea in his head of creating Conquest, right? And then when he started realizing that he's onto something, and there is part of the lore that I'm absolutely amazed by when I started first hearing it. He started talking with Constantinos. Together, they started shaping a little bit the stories, and then it has happened that some of Stavros' very close friends were some of the top artists in the country when it comes to that.
Oh wow.
And yeah, at the beginning was a little spitballing here and there, talking about how it can happen, and we were very fortunate that Stavros has had access to. Stavros was actually capable of starting the company,
That's
right?
fantastic.
Yeah, and it was a huge. We knew that it was a very difficult undertaking, especially because when you're starting such a project, it's not just a full-time job. It's not a 9 to 5 sort of thing. It's like your undivided attention needs to go there,
Mm-hmm.
right? Your day revolves around setting this thing up, and at the very beginning, it's all these great opportunities and all these great ideas and hopes and dreams of what this can become. But this needs to be able to run, and this needs to be able to produce miniatures. It needs to be able to take these miniatures and get it in people's hands, right? There are so many things that have to happen that when this project started, we all doubled down on it, from designing the rules to essentially putting the foundation for what Parabellum became later on.
Man, that's so awesome. And how many? So I know Stavos and you. How many others were involved in that initial startup?
So, um, I hope I'm not. When we started on at the very beginning, we didn't have an office and so on. It wasn't. It was more of a. It was very decentralized in the sense that Stavros would work with this one group of artists and then with this one group of things. So I think at the very beginning we were about when we started producing things, I think we were about 9 to 10 people. By producing, I don't mean miniatures, but producing art and lore and so on.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Or- Yeah, so that when we were starting, conceptualizing everything and bringing the first 3D sculptors in and doing the first, concepts and so on. So I think about 8 to 10.
Wow.
Definitely, our a lot of people saw this as a great opportunity. A lot of people wanted to participate because, especially in Greece, Greece is big on board games, and the country is producing quite a few board games every
Oh, I did
year.
not.
In terms of war games, there wasn't something similar. Like there were a
Yeah.
lot of companies making, fantasy miniatures, but not entirely like a full-on fledged war game with its own unique IP and so on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people wanted to jump in, and we started working on it, and a lot of people have come and went since then,
Oh, of course.
as it happens. But yeah, we started off strong with a very passionate team, I'm just very happy that I met all these people throughout these years.
Man, that's terrific. That it really is. I, did you find it intimidating to get started? You know, I mean, there's so many other games on the market, and obviously some
Yeah.
are big players and that kind of stuff. But you know, was that intimidating to get started in trying to get people to try it out?
So this ties a little. So when I first got started, like from my own point of view, right? When I first
Hmm.
got started with Parabellum, I was playtesting the game.
Okay.
And back then, we were working with River Horse Studio and Alessio Cavatore for the rules, and of course, me having played a lot of games that had his name on it,
Yeah.
right off the bat, are like, okay, welcome to we're building a game. Here's Cavatore that you have to talk to, deal with it, kind of thing. Yeah, like, and it's like, yeah, okay, we're going serious, and enlisting, names like that. I'm gonna tell you, it doesn't come very cheap. It doesn't come very
Oh, of
easy
course.
always. So it's like, well, here it is. There you go. Start talking with this person and give him feedback on the rules. Kind of things like that.
Hmm.
And then as it's with all companies at that level, there are all these different things that you have the opportunity to do, and I saw a lot of interest in many different things, so it became feedback. Then it became a few rules at the very beginning when it comes to start designing army lists, or when we had a different idea over certain rules and we wanted to go in a different direction. Like, I would sit down and I would write a lot of the rules to present it, and and go back and forth as the usual design processes.
Hmm.
And then, yeah, as it started expanding, you you really start getting a good look at the scope of the project, like how everything needs to go from zero to a product.
Yes.
And yeah, knowing definitely that there are all these great games out there, we had to make sure that the game was good. The game
Hmm.
was, as the best we could. And I think that we were very fortunate because there was a gap in the with the wargaming, universe,
Yeah.
for a rank and fantasy game at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, and that's it's funny. So I've played rank and flank games for some time, and there was a few of them from various companies, small and large. Some of them were like, you know, you can buy like a rule set for like $5 off of like a PDF document, you know, like a, what do you call it? Amazon library has some. So like I've, you know, had models and rank and flank and I was using them. But the thing that stood out to me when I was first introduced to Conquest was the card system. So like the actual command deck, or you put your units in order and then you have to choose. Like, how early in the development process was that decided on?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah,
Apologies.
yeah, yeah. So the idea of you know, in the start of the phase, you order your units and like which one's going to activate first and second and third and so on. And I'm just curious as to where that concept came from because I have never seen that before and I loved it.
Oh, okay, yeah, I get you. So, um, when we design rules in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to first get the story straight, as we say. Like, for example, when we are thinking about a game of conquest, or about when we're thinking about two factions fighting in the world of AI, like, what does it look like?
Mm-hmm.
And we wanted to go for a world that is very low fantasy. Even though there's strong magical presence, magic is not as apparent, and it's more esoteric, and it's more um, it has a very different theme to it.
Mm-hmm.
So we want a lot of things to be grounded into reality, and that included combat, and how warfare it takes place.
Mm-hmm.
So we knowing, especially knowing how real battles were fought, we we saw an opportunity to make combat based on strategic foresight and intuition, rather than list build, rather than
Yes.
combo building, essentially.
See,
Be-
yeah, and that's a great way to articulate what I was trying to say.
yeah, because right, we thought that okay, we're making a war game, right? Okay, we're making a mass battle fantasy rank and flank game, but what are the qualities, what are the skills that we want players to be tested on? Like
Hmm.
what kind of thinking our two players, are using when they're playing a game of Conquest? And we wanted to have that strategic foresight element to it, because many battles are won by just the right people being at the right place at the right time. And I think that the command stack mechanic and the whole drawing and command cards and all of these stuff, I think helped us really bring that notion to life within the game, and it allows us to tell this story when you're
Yeah,
playing a game of Conquest.
yeah, I would agree. And the reason I pointed out as my favorite mechanic of the system is just because, man, I love that all of the heavy thinking I feel like is front loaded at the beginning of the turn. Reassess the battle. What's going on? What do I need to do? Okay, put the cards in order, and then from there it's just like, no matter what, I'm choosing this unit. I don't get a choice anymore. What can I do with them?
Yeah, no, that's right, and I like that feeling of inertia, right? You
Mm-hmm.
give out your orders, and it's just if you give out an order and people start running, they start building up momentum. It's not instant. The change in pace, the change in direction, the when maneuvering with just a bunch of soldiers, you don't just say stop and everyone stops, right? There's
Yep.
this inertia, this sort of momentum that has to die out before you are redirected.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, one of the questions that I had here was when you guys are creating a unit, let's say like a new unit rules wise, because you have several factions now. There's 5 playable, but you have thrown out rules for things that you don't have models yet for, or that are in
Mhm.
development right now, and that's totally awesome. My question is, like, how do you design a unit with this concept that you have, lore wise, and then you also have to have the very real component of like rules to represent that,
Yeah.
and that process just boggles my mind.
So that's a really good question, and I think it comes down to what I said before, that for us, in order to design rules, any kind of rules, we
Hmm.
have to get our story straight. And by story, like, it's not just the lore. Is if I say, for example, why does a faction have bows? Let's say, well, it makes sense that this faction needs a ranged element to it. It makes sense in the kind of technology that this world possesses. It kind of makes sense in the kind of warfare, right? You want to be able to hit something from afar. There's actual tactical importance to it. And
Mm.
in the same way, we're trying to get into the mind of the faction that we are designing for, a regiment for, and we're saying why, for example, with the marksman, what are the marksman clones? Okay, they would have bows, and of course, their concept is to that they fire faster. So how do we show that? How do we portray that? And it makes sense that the spires would have that, because if they can create new life forms, I think it wouldn't be a problem to give a third arm to someone, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So the first thing we do is that we're thinking of the faction as a
Hmm.
whole. We are thinking of who the faction is, what they do, what do they have in their disposal. And I think a great for example, one of the factions that is coming up is the Old Dominion,
Hmm.
right? And without spoiling too much, I would say that
Yes, please. Spoil all of it. I'm so excited.
let's say we're thinking about what the Old Dominion is, right?
Hmm.
There are, after the fall of Haslia, the essence of Haslia found the those who were buried in his honor, like vessels for the Sarge of Haslia, right? They were appropriate vessels. So what are the kind of soldiers? What are the kind of vessels that the Sarge of Haslia would inhabit?
Mm.
And therefore, so for example, would it be something akin to what the 100 Kingdoms have right now? That wouldn't really be the case because they are soldiers of old, right? So we're
Yes.
thinking a little bit about what it is that the faction has, what the faction has access to, lot or a little bit of access to, and what are the tactical choices that this faction would have to make? For
Mm.
example, when we're thinking about the lore of the Old Dominion, we understand that everything that was dedicated to Haslia is a valid vessel for its swords, right? Which means it doesn't just mean fallen soldiers, it means literally anything that was dedicated to Haslia. Spoiler,
Mm. Okay.
right? So, would you have, I mean, we've seen in art, right? You have statues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dedicated to Haslia. So could those be a vessel to Haslia, and could those be weaponized essentially? Well, it's well within what the Old Dominion would have access to. Therefore, we start by looking at these kind of things, right? Therefore, we're expecting to see something like that. We allow the faction and the world it inhabits in to kind of like tell us what it is that it will be using on the battlefield.
I love it. I love hearing that. And so that'll inform kind of like your obviously your rules decisions, and from there it's a matter of playtesting.
Mhm.
I'd assume you had to figure out that the spires don't they already shoot fast, and yeah, okay. I dig it.
Yeah, like for example, we're saying that if what are the how do the spires fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
They fight in a certain way. They have expendable troops and they have more elite troops and so on. Um, does it make sense that they have a wide variety of different troop qualities? And it does, given the different
Yes.
sub-faction, given the fact that they would have lowly drones all the way up to clones. It makes sense. Um, that they would have access to all these kind of quality of troops, and of course to what ratios and how would they be using them. So if the story checks out, if the story we have in our head, not just lore wise but also like if it makes sense from a perspective of if it makes logical sense for that faction,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that faction's logic is, then in a way it makes the that new regiment feel very natural and feel very right at home.
Mm.
So to summarize it, yeah, we look at the lore, we make up a story, we decide what it is that how the faction fights, what is its inherent weaknesses, what is its inherent strengths, and once we decide what are how the way in which that faction approaches war, we're trying to see what kind of tools would they use to wage war in that way.
I love it. I love it. How do things like the faction abilities? So like, I can understand for like we'll pick on the Wadroon a little bit. Where did the at what point it did in that kind of development mindset did something like their chants? So if you don't know, if you're listening, sorry everybody if you don't know. The Wadroon have this thing where they can basically chant to various deities that they have, and like it'll give them kind of buffs and bonuses in the game, but it's to represent like a growing tide of energy or something like that. Is that correct?
So
Loosely.
so the four cults represent the four first Wadrun, the most powerful incantations of what the Wadrun
Yes.
were when they were first created, and the chants are a manifestation of an early civilization creating culture for itself, and usually music is the and chanting and any sort of rhythmical humming is usually what brings these kind of cultures and civilizations into this state of trance, into this you get in the zone in the same way that armies would play music to
Mm-hmm.
get people to march together and so on. So we were thinking of the story of the Wadrun, right? And first of all, the Wadrun is this race that was created to be warriors for the spires.
Yes.
And so if you're a spire and you have ample resources through your spires to feed and grow these soldiers,
Mm-hmm.
how would you design, right, a faction that would fight for you? You would want them strong,
Yep.
You would want them to be able to undertake a variety of missions. So they would have to be fast. They would have to be effective in few numbers. They would have to be able to see in the dark, to have a keen hearing, right? Everything that you can put in there, you're trying to specialize, right? Of course, that came at a with the problem that they have really high metabolism, and having all these traits makes you very hungry, essentially,
Yes.
right? As we see in their story. But when you create this faction that is sentient, I mean, in the sense that it has to make solid tactical decisions, it has to think on its toes, and it has to make actual decisions about things. It has heightened senses, and it's very good in combat. When you suddenly release it onto the world to die in defense of the Spire against the Dragon, and they suddenly manage to escape, and they're now left on their own, they're going to try and create this culture. They're going to try and create an identity for themselves, and the only thing that they know is that their most powerful incantations are represented through conquest, war, death, and famine. They
Okay.
they find purpose in dedicating themselves in following not the cults in a religious way, but more in a way of honing their skills,
Yes, like the
following a
disciplines kind of a
certain
thing.
path.
Yeah.
Let's say, yeah. So when they're in battle, you know, music being a very prominent rhythmic chanting being a very prominent part of their culture, as they are just now discovering their culture, is this sort of, they can hear everything, they can relay orders very easily, and at the same time, as they fight and they chant and they do what they're designed to do, they find purpose in it, and they get into this zone, into this trance, right? That they're just, everything, their world revolves around fighting in that very moment. So they find themselves in this serene state of being absolutely in the zone.
Yeah. I dig it. And then that's represented, obviously there's a mechanic for chanting and that kind of
That's
stuff in
right.
the game.
Yeah.
That's so
Because
awesome.
because it's not, you're through the chants, they're not manifesting supernatural powers.
Yes.
Right, it's they're pushing harder, or they become more aggressive, or they're not, for example, tier 1 famine gives you essentially +2, with the update it's going to give you shock. It's essentially 2 instances of inspired, right? That is because they're in the zone, they're becoming more aggressive, they're becoming more, they find an advantage and they want to capitalize on it.
Right.
So yeah, this is essentially where it comes from. It's not religious in nature. It's more of a tribal, getting hyped during battle sort of thing.
And for sure. And was that designed at the same time as sort of like the army was being designed, or did that come like as a layer on top of it?
So, many times there's a little bit of a chicken and an egg
Yeah.
situation
Okay. I totally get that.
with creating, because you have, when you're creating an army list, you are bound to ask yourself very specific questions, right? The lore can be very vague in the beginning,
Of
and the
course.
lore can explain, the genesis of a certain faction in very broad strokes. But then when you have to sit down and actually write about artifacts, write about things, you're essentially talking about a piece of that faction's history that the broader lore doesn't necessarily talk about. So we knew that they're this young civilization, that they are this group of individuals that have to find sense, because they were literally taken out of vats and thrown into war.
Yes.
They are looking for an identity, they're looking for a culture, they are smart, they are sentient, they have, they are fully there, fully aware of themselves. And so we wanted a mechanism then. For example, we had to ask ourselves that, how does that absolutely translate when we are playing the game? So having to make that army list forces us to think about how the lore works on a very micro scale during combat. So it's the very process of building an army list forces you to go back into the lore and rethink it and add to it.
That's terrific. I think that's awesome. Absolutely. The next question I had here for you is, I always like to ask this whenever I interview anybody who has anything to do with games. What's your favorite part of Conquest? And it could be First Blood, it could be Last Argument.
My absolutely favorite part, I think, I wouldn't say specific, because in the way that I see Conquest, I see different games as just different levels of zooming in and out of the game.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
So I think that this is what I like about Conquest, that we are striving towards creating all these different levels in which you can experience the world of AI. I feel like I have control over different levels of the game. And I absolutely and of course we're going to be doing, this is no spoiler, we talked about in the past, we're working on a board game as well that we take for example the Last Argument of Kings, and we zoom out one more level.
Oh, like full on nations and that kind of stuff,
Yeah,
rather than
like kingdoms, like moving, exactly, and then being able to play the games in an actual Last Argument of Kings.
Oh, that's so sick. I remember
Yeah.
I'll mention another game just because it's not anywhere near a rank and flank, but I was playing a game of X-Wing, and when they relaunched the big ship version where it's like Armada, the bigger capital ships, whatever, we would stop a game of Armada to then like, okay, well, if my little X-Wing, token fights your little Y-Wing token, we would then stop, and then we would actually play a game of X-Wing to represent how the outcome of that fight went. So you're constantly zooming in and zooming out. And so,
that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, you can just make one epic long battle, and if it's just you and a buddy, you pick it up and jump right back in.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally feel you. I mean, I've done this with historical games that we were zooming in and out of different systems because we liked it at that point, right? And I absolutely, this is something that I love about Conquest. I love that it is a complete world, and it's becoming more and more complete every day, right? With every new release, with every new piece of lore. And I think that it's very hard for me to tell you that I like one thing or the other, because I just like having the option of delving as deep or as wide as I want.
Well, I mean, hey, having the ability to do that certainly sets you all apart from many other games, and that's terrific that you can. That's wonderful. That's a great answer. Of course, you nailed that one. Without giving me a straight answer, you nailed it. Okay.
The tools of the trade. You have to be.
Yes, yeah.
Diplomatic answers is part of the job description.
Yep. Just dodging stuff like Neo from the Matrix. Well, let me ask you this. So one of the things that when I was first introduced to the Conquest, and really I'm going to say Conquest, but the Parabellum community, is your guys' interactions with your fan base is like one of my favorite things. And I'll go ahead and throw that as my favorite, thing about the company is just so when I was introduced to it, there's like a small, I guess online community, but the Discord is really quite, I guess, prolific. I mean, there's just constant buzz and excitement and enthusiasm, and people are really cool. Tell me about this. Like, how do you like to interact with your fans and your audience, as far as like, how do you reach out to them and take feedback and that kind of stuff?
I think we saw from when we first started the company, when we first started the game, right? We were thinking about how we wanted in the past to interact with developers as players,
yes.
Right? And we realized that when a game grows a lot, it becomes very hard to have a one-on-one with everyone.
Of course.
So um, and let's keep that to the back of our head. And then there was this other thing that we also wanted to create a community of volunteers, for the game, the Vanguard community. So I was thinking at some point, how to combine the two. And because we wanted to base our community not just on we're the developers and everyone else, is centered around us. We wanted to create this sort of community that has many local community builders and community leaders, and those being the
Mm.
vanguards, right? So we wanted to create a tiered, let's say, system in which people could always have a direct line of communication with us,
Hmm.
even if it's asking a vanguard and then the vanguard asking me. So
Okay.
we wanted from the very beginning to set up a line of communication with every single player that would be sustainable no matter how large the community started. And I think it's the fact that we started building this with that in mind
Hmm.
is what allowed us today to be very active with our community. Unfortunately, this is something that you have to build towards it, because otherwise it's very difficult to, like, it would be very difficult to build it now that the community has grown a lot.
Yeah, I could understand that. Yeah, it had to be at the forethought of your mind when you were building it all up.
And yeah, and the Discord is a play. Honestly, I love the Discord because I love when every time I have an opportunity, I go in there. I answer. I always make sure I try to answer rules questions. There's a lot of interaction there. We started doing the happy hours that everyone can join in and everyone can ask
Hmm.
questions live. I mean, yeah, and we try to make sure that we do it in different time zones. There's been times that to have happy hours with certain time zones. Stavros and I have slept in the office, like doing it, like really late. But this is something that we're fine doing. This is something that we want to do. To be disclaimer, then we were playing Age of Empires on our computer. So, uh,
Wait, which Age of Empires?
the classic.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, maybe we also game sometimes when we're late in the office.
Hey, man.
Um, but this is we very well realize that there can be no community to lead or exist for that matter if there are
Hmm.
no people that are interested in the game, and we wanted to make sure that our communities are the cornerstone of what we are building.
That's so awesome. That's so refreshing to hear. I mean, especially nowadays when I feel like public opinion is very important. Just companies having goodwill built towards them is very vital. I think word of mouth is super important, especially in an age where there's so many games out there. Just even having a friend being like, "Hey, this is cool," and hey, everyone who works here is not a jerk. That is its own remarkable sales pitch in today's world. Unfortunately, um, let's see. One other thing, and I'll go ahead and I'll answer this as well. What is your favorite faction? And I know that the the default is like a parent saying I love all my kids equally, but we all know there's that one kid you wink at. You don't have to tell us, but
To be honest with you, it's whichever faction I'm working at the moment.
I respect that. I'm somebody who I swap armies all the time. I get
Yeah,
that.
because yeah, right now I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm building Apex Predators, and I'm super in love with that. And then there was some time ago that I was building like 3 full phalanxes of Household Guard, and I was just insanely in love with how they looked. And before that, I was doing like I gotten the what you call it, the upgrade. I was using the upgrade spruce for the first grown drones, and I was building big blocks of those, and I was then in love with that and the concept of putting catabolic nodes in there.
Oh yeah,
Honestly, it's whatever I have in my hands at that moment.
that is fair. I'll give you that one. I mean, it's still another awesome way to dodge the question, but that's awesome. For me, I gotta say, Spire are my favorite. I guess unique IP that you guys have. I love the story of the Spires. I think they're one of the most interesting factions. Gameplay wise, I think I lend myself more towards Dweghome, which is what I've been playing more recently. just sort of a tanky brick. I mean, the Dweck story is also deeply fascinating. It's actually probably the video I've had the most comments on is my Dweck one, is just people being like, this is the coolest take on dwarves ever. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's rad.
I mean, I'm to be honest with you, it's just like if you asked me a month ago, I would tell you I was painting the ice art, and I'm like, I'm in love with that, and then I'm in love with the next one. It's just it's not really. I think that when you're working on a game, it's not really trying to give a diplomatic answer, but to be honest with you, when you've worked on every single faction and you've worked on the game and you've been part of the team that is creating this world, it's very difficult to not always zoom out and see the world as a whole.
That's totally fair.
It's very difficult for me to say, oh, I love specifically this thing, because I'm forced in a way to see it more holistically.
That is absolutely fair. Yeah, and let me ask. So, what's next for you guys? I mean, you launched the Wadroon. I know that, and then in the most recent story, and I'm not asking for spoilers or anything like that. Anything you haven't revealed already, but you mentioned a board game. Like, what's next for Parabellum?
What is that? There are so many things that are coming. That is just insane.
Yeah.
So we have. First of all, there's always about the pursuit of making the rules as perfect as possible, right? This is an ongoing pursuit, and we've been as time has grown, our rule system has improved immensely. And so we're working on a First Blood rehaul, on a First Blood update overall. That makes the game. We want to make sure that First Blood is its own game in its own right. We want to maintain this zooming in, but at the same time, we understand inherently that playing on a different scale requires a different approach in terms of rules. So right now we're investing our time heavily on First Blood and making it a game that can be played in tournaments and competitive. Right now, Last Argument of Kings is at a place that I'm absolutely very happy with, and we are working on some more updates about that. Then eventually we want to do 2.0 for the Last Argument of Kings. We want to be doing a Magic rehaul, the way the Magic works and how Magic interacts with the game.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
We have the Old Dominion coming up.
As a faction?
As a faction, yes.
Yes. Nice.
With a very, very strong release. Especially now that the factions are being fleshed out, we want to make sure that if a player wants to play Old Dominion, they can have a large enough collection of miniatures to be able to participate in a tournament, or that they're not feeling like they're left out, or they only have just a few things. So we want to make sure that when we are releasing a new faction, we're going hard at it. And I cannot even begin to describe how cool they are. I cannot even just. Like, for example, in front of me I have an Apex Predator, and the other day, I was putting together Old Dominion. And I was like, this, I cannot, like, my favorite thing changes by the second.
Fair enough.
I don't know, right? So that, we have that. We are working on a board game. That is, we've been working for it a while now. We've been going on and off about it, but we want to make sure we get it right, because, we want to really represent this level on a kingdom level. Okay. Right? We are putting a lot of work with our army builder. We want to work towards eventually making it into an app. There's just so many things.
Yeah, an app would be terrifically helpful. But man, that's so awesome. It's I love the fact that you guys are not just taking the win from having a good couple of opening years, and you're just still running with it. That's absolutely awesome.
And working with the existing factions for new releases, there's just some really exciting stuff coming.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I wanted to point out that I really appreciated, since I actually have someone from the company on the line, is the way that 1.5 was rolled out. So for those of you who don't know, most recently you have released the 1.5 Rules Edition for Conquest Last Argument of Kings, which cleaned up a few things, and then also gave every faction like faction specific or sub faction rules. So now you can have like different kinds of 100 kingdoms and different kinds of creeds for Dwegholm and that kind of stuff. But for me, I didn't give a lot of input, even though I was playing test games because I have 2 Vanguards locally. Then they were like, "Oh, you should try this out." But I didn't give a lot of feedback in the Discord because I just kind of wanted to watch you guys, and seeing the way that you took feedback, and when it came out, everybody was happy, but nobody was like complaining that X is broken. I feel like it was probably the smoothest launch of a relaunch of an edition ever. And I just wanted to say that to you. That's all. It's just like you guys crushed it.
Thank you. No, actually, yeah, we were holding our breaths. We were just so excited that the way 1.5 rolled out. We were very careful with it. And one thing, here's the thing. We do take feedback at heart, and the reason is that honestly, there is no way mathematically that we can play enough games to say ever that 100% of what I'm doing right now is balanced.
Yes, of course.
It's impossible. It doesn't matter how large the company is, doesn't matter how many people are working on it. There's absolutely no way there's going to be something that is not entirely there's not an issue with. This is it's just you're always pursuing this perfect rule set, but honestly, just that you're always going to be pursuing it.
Yep.
So every time we see feedback, honestly, we take it at heart. We take it very seriously, and we want to do a couple more a more round of updates to 1.5, which, to be honest, it doesn't change the gameplay. So it's not like it's not gameplay changing, but it's about taking all of the questions and incorporating into the rulebook.
Yeah.
There are a lot of updates are coming. For example, we were having questions about turning the tide, or we had a lot of questions about, let's say, things like shock. Okay, you say you give +2 inspire, but how does that work? Given that if you have a class of 3, you will go to 4, and then there is rerolls. How does that work? Like rules that are not well defined are becoming. Based on people's questions, we will be defining them better. There are for example, we had an issue with impact hits, right? We have a lot of questions because hit pertains to something that has already. It's not an attack where you have to roll for a hit. It's a hit. It sounds like it's skipping a step. So we made sure
I know exactly what you mean.
Right, we're made sure to rename terms and properly and even better define them based on people's feedbacks. And we're being, for example, everything is going to be rolling lower, right? There's no point in having certain rolls like reinforcement rolling higher and so on, right? So all of these things are getting streamlined to ensure that the game becomes as polished as it is humanly possible.
That's terrific. And I'd encourage anyone who's listening, if you're an armchair quarterback when it comes to rules design, no matter what game you're playing, and you think you could do it better, like
this is a great term.
Yes.
This is a great term. I've never heard that before.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's someone who thinks that I could do that, and you're like, no, it's a lot harder than you think. Rules design there's a lot that goes into it, but it's really cool when you see a whole community, like somebody throws an idea out there in one of the chats regarding FAQs and that kind of stuff, and instead of people harping on why it won't work or whatever, people try to make it work, and it's just a really cool community to see that in and see that happen organically. There's no mods involved. It's just people getting excited with each other.
No, yeah, I feel so absolutely thankful for the community that we're building right now. It's just I really don't have enough words to say how grateful I am of all the vanguards, because there are vanguards that are doing just insane things. Channels, there are vanguards out there. I'm getting sometimes emails. I played 35 games in a row with like these rules to test them out. Like the amount of work people put into testing things or the amount of actual excitement that there's out there. And these are
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten emails like that. These are, or
Oh,
like
I believe
for
it.
example, we're doing a scenario contest, and they're saying 2 or 3, and I get an email with 13, right?
Yes, I know a scenario guy.
Right, right. Uh, so like when you see all this excitement, it's just this positive feedback loop that helps you push even further, right? You want,
Mm-hmm.
like, it's just when we see the excitement, when we see how people are happy to play the game, it makes me even more willing to just do the put the work, do even more, like sit down with everybody, try as hard as we can to fix any problems and to develop the game even further.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I love it, and that's I feel like that's what I was trying to say earlier, as far as like finding companies to get excited about is like, you guys can sell models to other people. You can always get new customers, but the way that you handle community and that kind of stuff, I just can't give you enough credit for, because that's irreplaceable, and that's terrific that people are so excited about the game. I know that I'm very keen to hear what's going on with First Blood as that develops, the new
Mhm.
take on First Blood, just because I mean, that's honestly, I get asked to cover that probably more than the full Last Argument of Kings, specifically in my comment section. But
Mhm.
I think that's just because people are just discovering the game, and it's a lower point level. But
Yeah.
but yeah, keep us in the loop on that, because that's a very exciting thing. That's the size of game that I can get in pretty regularly.
Well, if I was to give a little bit of a spoiler, let's say, or just of a taste of things to come.
Mm-hmm.
So if last argument of kings, you're playing at the level of the warlord characters and their respective forces, right?
Yeah.
In when you're zooming in one more level and you're going into first blood, now you have a character and what happens within their own warband.
Mm.
Oh, for example, command upgrades now play more of a leading role than just providing buffs. You have, for example, we're working into making the combat a lot more gritty. We want the miniatures to be able to sustain and put out a lot more punishment. So it's not going to be. We're looking at reworking the stats completely. We're
Oh,
looking
cool.
we are looking at reworking the ways in which the forces enter the battlefield, completely different, in the sense that you're not just finding yourself in the midst of a chaotic battlefield. You are the character and 20 friends fighting another character and 20 friends. And so, right, the scale of it means that certain tactical possibilities are now open or closed, depending on
Of
the
course.
case. We want to see, let's say, different regiments cooperating with each other in creating ad hoc formations that make gameplay sense. Why not?
Hmm.
Would a halberd being able to attack and fight over a shield of a men at arms, let's say?
Ah, okay. That's an awesome one.
We're looking certain special rules or draw events to be activated by how your troops are formed and how they're placed in respect to their comrades. Like, for example, they're like all these different things that you cannot really zoom into or manifest during a game of the Last Argument of Kings. We want to now bring it down to the soldier level. We don't
Mm-hmm.
want First Blood to be so much around what the characters can do, but how capable the actual forces and you, the player, are in commanding them. We want to show the actual soldiers fight, and this is something that I'm really excited about.
Man, that's terrific. Yeah, I'm excited to learn more. Keep us all posted. I will definitely be reading or jumping into the what do you call it? The chats you guys do. I can't remember.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
the happy hours. Yeah,
Happy hour. Okay, I don't know. I don't know
yeah.
why it skipped my brain. The happy hours you guys do, definitely for sure. Um, you know, I asked you what was going on next in the company. Is there anything else you wanted to share with folks that you're excited about, or anything like that? We kind of blew through my questions here. I'm having a great talk with you, by the way.
honestly, I'm just excited with all these new folks that are coming in and playing Conquest. And I really am, and I'm saying this in the most sincere way possible. It's one thing, to have a game in your head and imagining how miniatures would look on a table, and a completely different case, actually seeing these miniatures existing and seeing them fight against each other on a tabletop.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited about all the new players joining, and there's our community is growing rapidly, and I'm very excited about some projects that we haven't announced yet, but there's some really exciting times coming.
Oh, man, I am so excited to be a part of those and be covering them because it's definitely become one of my favorite games for sure. I mean, just in terms of I just like reading about the units and I don't know the campaign builder you guys or the campaign system you guys have on your site. It's just you're crushing it. So you got at least one fan here in the middle of nowhere, Iowa.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay. Well, I think I'll go ahead and close this out. Thank you so much for joining me today, man. It means the absolute world to me.
No, thank you. We were telling before that this is actually the first time we are talking to each other live, other than email, right? And
Yep.
it's just a very huge pleasure to meet you.
Oh, absolutely. Hope to do it again very, very soon, my friend.
Absolutely.